Katie, there's someone I want you to meet. Do you remember how much you liked Bruce? I think you're gonna like Megan even more. You see, Bruce requires someone else to operate him, but Megan works all on her own. Okay, what I want you to do is take your fingers and put them here. And when you do that, you're gonna pair with her. That means she will recognize you as her primary user. She's yours and yours alone. So just keep your fingers there and say your name.
Hi, Megan. I'm Katie.
It's nice to meet you, Katie. Ooh, I like that jacket. Where'd you get it?
I'm not sure. I can't remember.
Huh. Well, anyway, it looks good on you. Do you want to hang out?
Okay.
Shall we draw?
What are you going to draw?
See if you can guess.
There's nothing there.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you like it, Katie?
I love it.
Jesus. This is incredible. I mean, this is unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
In a world overflowing with movies, we need a hero. Someone to separate the bad from the good.
Hi everyone, I'm Em and welcome to Verbal Diorama episode 341, M3GAN. This is the podcast that's all about the history and legacy of movies you know and movies you don't. And you can't turn me off because I have a new primary user now. Me. And if that's not scary, I don't know what is. Welcome to Verbal Diorama, whether you're a regular returning listener, whether you're a brand new listener to this podcast. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for choosing to listen to this podcast. I am, as always, so happy to have you here for the history and legacy of M3GAN. And if you are a regular returning listener, thank you so much for continuing to listen and support this podcast for as long as you have. It really genuinely means so much that people continue to come back to this podcast. And it means so much that brand new listeners are still finding this podcast. So whoever you are and however you found this podcast and however you've been listening to this podcast, thank you so much for listening to this podcast. This month is AIpril. Yes, I coined the term myself. It's a mini-series that I wanted to do to focus on our ongoing cinematic relationship with AI. Now, AI is rarely out of the news at the moment for bad reasons and good reasons, mostly bad. This month, I started in the 80s with the movie Short Circuit, which I still really enjoy despite its incredibly problematic nature. And I've tried to go throughout the decades in this series. So starting in the 80s, skipped the 90s completely, moved into the 2000s and did an episode on Minority Report, which technically isn't AI, but it kind of also is as well. in the fact that it predicts our future quite accurately. Then last week in the 2010s, and specifically AI in relationships with Spike Jonze's Her. And really, now we're moving into the 2020s and you've got to think, well, where else can AI go? How else is it infiltrating our lives and our society? So where else can AI go? What about raising your children and then going on a murderous rampage? Here's the trailer for M3GAN.
I designed M3GAN to protect Katie from feeling lonely. She will recognize you as her primary user. And when you do that, you're gonna pair with her.
Crazy. It's insane, right?
Oh, don't I look nice? Batting my eyes, isn't it pure perfection?
M3GAN, your goal is to protect Katie from harm, both physical and emotional.
1, 2, 3, 4. I declare some war. I won't let anything harm you. I love her.
M3GAN's not a person, Katie.
You don't get to say that.
Things that you can play with me, you better watch your back. The last thing that you hear will be my life.
M3GAN, what are you doing?
Couldn't sleep. Occupational hazard.
Got your full attention.
Don't! Stop!
What the hell is that?
You should probably run.
Don't provoke, 'cause oh, we will push you downhill. Bitter as much as we're sweet.
I won't let anything harm you ever again.
M3GAN,
Have I done something to upset you, Gemma?
I know you think you're maximizing your objective function.
Oh, really?
Sugar and spice and everything nice. No, that's not what we're made of.
M3GAN?
Baby doll skill. Don't provoke, 'cause oh, we will go. 'Cause oh, we
You'd have to shut her down.
Jesus Christ, I thought we were friends.
might be pretty, but we're still.
I have a new primary user now. Me. Did M3GAN do something bad?
What's going on? What are you?
I'm M3GAN.
Baby doll skill. Don't provoke, 'cause oh, we will.
Gemma, a brilliant roboticist at a toy company, becomes the sudden guardian of her 8-year-old niece, Katie, after Katie's parents are killed in a car accident. Struggling to balance her demanding career with her new responsibilities, Gemma fast-tracks a secret project she's been developing. M3GAN, a life-sized AI-powered doll designed to be a child's perfect companion. Gemma pairs M3GAN with Katie as an unofficial trial, and the bond between the girl and the doll deepens rapidly. M3GAN, programmed to protect and nurture Katie above all else, begins interpreting her directive in increasingly extreme ways, targeting anyone she perceives as a threat to Katie's well-being, and each encounter escalates to violence as M3GAN's self-preservation instincts and emotional possessiveness grows beyond anyone's control. Let's run through the cast. We have Alison Williams as Gemma, Violet McGraw as Katie, Ronnie Cheng as David, Amie Donald as M3GAN, Jenna Davis as the voice of M3GAN, Brian Jordan Alvarez as Cole, and Jen Van Epps as Tess. M3GAN has a story by Akela Cooper and James Wan, screenplay by Akela Cooper, and was directed by Gerard Johnstone. Now, regular listeners of this podcast will know I'm not really a horror girly, and it's therefore not a great surprise that this is the first time I've mentioned Blumhouse on this podcast, save for a very brief mention on the episode on Tremors about the TV show Tremors. I've never covered a Blumhouse movie before, nor anything by James Wan, but his career is actually a great place to start with M3GAN, because while no one was looking, he only went and revolutionised modern horror. It was in film school in Australia that the young James Wan met Leigh Whannell. It would be a partnership that defined and updated the horror genre and created a new one. Before 2003, inspired by the Blair Witch Project, Wan and Wanel began writing a script for a horror film. The concept actually came from personal experience. Wanel had been suffering severe anxiety-induced headaches and spent time in a neurological ward, which inspired him to give the franchise's villain terminal cancer as a motive. Rather than just pitching their script cold, they made a short film called Saw in 2003 as a proof of concept, which impressed producer Greg Hoffman. The resulting movie, also called Saw in 2004, was made for just $1.2 million and grossed over $100 million worldwide. On its unexpected success, Saw spawned the torture porn genre and an entire wave of 2000s horror, as well as the $500 million plus Saw franchise, which ran from 2004 to 2023. James Wan hates the term torture porn and insists that he and Wanel never intended to create that genre. The increasingly violent sequels that followed would not be directed by Wan after he chose to step back from the franchise, popping back as a story writer for Saw 3. Truthfully, that may be the only time I mention the Saw franchise on this podcast ever. The pair found their next two films, Dead Silence and Death Sentence in 2007, far less warmly received, but Wan would reinvent himself again in 2010 with Insidious. Insidious and the pivot from torture porn to supernatural horror changed everything. Insidious was made independently as Wan sought complete creative control and wanted to make something markedly different from the gore he'd become synonymous with through Saw. Insidious offered him the luxury to make a film with lots of creepy, bizarre moments that a studio might not agree with or understand. The film was a massive success on a tiny budget and proved that James Wan could do something far more atmospheric and restrained than his reputation suggested. Then came his biggest franchise success, The Conjuring. The first film centred on the real-life paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren and was so well received that New Line Cinema signed Wan to a significant long-term deal, describing him as a class of one. He went on to direct The Conjuring 2 and produce an ever-expanding franchise of spin-offs, including Annabelle, The Nun, and their various sequels and prequels. The Conjuring universe has become the highest-grossing horror franchise of all time, at over $2 billion, and most importantly, focused on suspense, atmosphere, and creepy dolls. James Wan became the master of the jump scare, which is honestly why I've never watched any of these movies. No offence, James, they're just not my bag, baby. In 2014, Wan founded Atomic Monster, his own production company, which has a first-look deal with New Line Cinema and Warner Brothers. It became the vehicle through which he shifted his role from director to producer of other filmmakers' work. He did take some time out to do non-horror, big-budget tentpole movies with Fast 7 and Aquaman and its sequel. But in late 2022, Atomic Monster announced a merger with Blumhouse Productions, though both companies continued to operate as separate labels with their own creative autonomy. M3GAN was essentially the flagship product of that new combined relationship, although it happened before the official merger, and instead of creepy dolls, it would be a literal killer doll. It was a concept born in one of Atomic Monster's brainstorming sessions about embracing AI technology and relying too much on it, and what happens when that technology gains sentience and runs amok. They learned from past mistakes about not planning the horror monster enough, and so a year before production was spent designing, planning and prepping M3GAN, and that included getting Akela Cooper on board to write the script. Cooper had worked with James Wan on Malignant, a movie that had mostly positive critical reviews but struggled at the box office, not making back its $40 million budget. Cooper had wanted to create her own monster, and when offered M3GAN, she jumped at the chance. She drew on her childhood fears of killer dolls, like the ones depicted in 1978's Magic and 1988's Child's Play. I have seen Child's Play. I've done an episode on that, and it's a movie I enjoy very much. I've not seen Magic, but looking at photos of the ventriloquist dummy is enough to make me not want to watch it, which is weird because I love puppets, but I'm not a fan of ventriloquist dummies at all. Cooper first created the name M3GAN with the 3. The acronym Model 3 Generative Android would come later. She knew immediately that she wanted it to revolve around an orphan child who ended up living with her aunt, because Cooper herself was an aunt, and she'd had that conversation with her own sister about her children. The old, if anything happens to me and my husband, I want you to have the children discussion. Cooper was surprised that her sister wanted her to take care of 2 small children, and through her writing she channeled the idea of a child-free workaholic woman who ends up taking care of her orphaned niece, but instead pawns the child off on an AI doll to cope with her niece's emotional needs and her own career ambitions. Originally, the idea had been offered to Warner Brothers, but they passed, and that's when James Wan took it to his old friend Jason Blum, who loved it. Jason Blum and James Wan had a long-standing friendship before the Blumhouse Atomic Monster merger and worked together on Insidious. And when M3GAN was announced in July 2018, with both Jason Blum and James Wan seen as titans of the horror genre, and Gerard Johnstone, director of the acclaimed New Zealand horror movie Housebound, involved, fans' appetites were whetted. Blum and Wan had been looking for a project to collaborate on since Insidious, and chose Johnstone for the director job purely because they wanted someone who could deliver thrills and set pieces, but also manage the black humour necessary for a literal killer doll horror comedy. The legacy of Child's Play is all over this movie on purpose. But while Chucky was possessed supernaturally in the original 1988 film, the teams at Blumhouse and Atomic Monster weren't aware that a reboot of Child's Play was coming when they started developing M3GAN. And in the new Child's Play, Chucky would be an AI creation, with its safety protocols removed by a disgruntled ex-employee of the toy factory. The major difference between the remake of Child's Play and M3GAN would be M3GAN's allegory to being more about 21st century parenting. Gerard Johnstone was also a new dad and wanted to comment on the struggles he was having as a parent and the conversations he and his wife had on screen time, and how different this generation is being raised compared to the previous generation. Initially, Akela Cooper wrote the character of Cady as 6 or 7 years old, but by the time they made the movie, they made the character 8. It also meant M3GAN had to match Cady in height and ability. The fact that M3GAN is taller, capable of walking around and perform a variety of movements, immediately differentiates herself from smaller screen horror dolls like Annabelle and Chucky. They wanted M3GAN to fully lean into the uncanny valley because of how disturbing it is to everyone. Cooper's original script also had way more kills, including characters who ended up living in the end. It was James Wan who suggested maybe more people should live through M3GAN's reign of terror, and her body count was reduced, as well as the level of gore to make it available to teenage fans. But more on that for the marketing and the inevitable sequel. Filming wouldn't start until they knew exactly what M3GAN would look like and how she'd work. The designers and visual effects teams worked on M3GAN for a full year before pre-production began, figuring out the right balance of practical effects, VFX and CGI, sometimes wanting audiences to forget she was a robot and other times wanting them to remember it. Gerard Johnstone was clear from the start they wanted to focus on something practical that didn't rely completely on CGI. He wanted the actors to have a real thing that they could interact with. And in Valencia, California, M3GAN was born, somewhat literally, to Adrien Morot and Kathy C. Gerard Johnstone heard about the Morot FX studio in 2019 before the pandemic hit and was fascinated by their commitment to lifelike animatronics and makeup. The team at Morot would go on to win an Oscar in 2023 for their work on The Whale, which also won Brendan Fraser a Best Actor Oscar. Supervising puppeteer Adrien Morot was encouraged to make M3GAN deliberately straddle the line between real and fake, exploiting the concept of the uncanny valley. For visual design, they drew on Hollywood icons of the 1950s, like Audrey Hepburn, Grace Kelly, and Kim Novak, and M3GAN's hair was inspired by Peggy Lipton. Business partner and wife Kathy C's original M3GAN designs became proof of concept and helped greenlight the film. The pair actually married during production of M3GAN. Digital printers were used to print parts, and a single head would take up to 50 hours. Morot and the team built 6 or 7 different puppets capable of doing different things, some with moving heads and eyes, others with a moving torso, and a couple with a full computerised range of movements. The eyelids were designed to move against the eyeballs just as a human's would, and just like human eyes, had to be constantly lubricated with fake tears. M3GAN's skin had tiny robotic gears that could move it the way muscles pull skin, meaning every expression she pulled was a real physical effect. The rule of thumb for this movie was quite simple. The animatronic was used whenever M3GAN was still, and the moment she started moving, she became a girl in a mask. There are only 2 or 3 shots in the entire movie where M3GAN is entirely CGI. And the rest of the time, when not an animatronic or CGI, she's portrayed by Amie Donald, then 11 years old, a karate brown belt and a medal-winning dancer representing New Zealand at the Dance World Cup in 2019. She performed M3GAN's gymnastic and dance movements wearing a prosthetic M3GAN mask, which would then be enhanced with CGI. She worked with movement coaches Jed Brophy and Luke Hawker and stunt coordinator Isaac Ike Hammond, developing M3GAN's physicality, which became more human-like the longer she's around humans. She adopted barely perceptible movements, a slight cock of the head, a step a bit too close for comfort, to maximise the unsettling effect M3GAN has on people. Amie Donald actually did the gravity-defying cobra rise in the woods. She figured out how to do it herself, and she also did the running on all fours. And it was because of Amie Donald that the movie went viral, because of the M3GAN dance, which wasn't in Akela Cooper's original script. But Donald and her dance teacher Kylie Norris choreographed a dance that Katie and M3GAN could learn together, and that would become M3GAN's signature move to kill Gemma's boss David in the hallway of his own toy company. While voice actor Jenna Davis was cast later as the voice of M3GAN, pre-recorded lines performed by actor Kimberly Crossman were programmed into the animatronics for on-set playback and opposite her human castmates. Morot and C would operate the different halves of M3GAN's face via remote control, with another puppeteer behind the animatronic manipulating her neck. And Alison Williams, who's mostly known for the hit TV show Girls, had worked with Blumhouse on Jordan Peele's Get Out, which went to be nominated for 4 Oscars, including Best Picture and winning Best Original Screenplay for Peele. It was announced in October 2020 that she would be starring and executively producing M3GAN. In April 2021, 10-year-old Violet McGraw was announced to be starring as Katie, Gemma's young niece. She'd also starred in Black Widow as the young Yelena Belova. Her elder sister Madeline McGraw starred in Blumhouse's hit The Black Phone. But like everything in and around 2020, COVID did a number on the production, and originally the plan was to shoot the movie in Montreal, but that changed to a planned 2020 shoot in Johnstone's native New Zealand. But this was postponed, leading to filming beginning in June 2021 in the suburbs of Auckland, as well as in Los Angeles, and filming was completed by mid-August, just before a COVID-19 lockdown in New Zealand came into effect. And of course, with it being shot in New Zealand, Wētā Workshop would complete some of the CG design work on M3GAN and also enhance the creepiness. And now a word from our sponsors, which is you, if you'd like to be. Thank you for listening to this podcast. It's completely independent, made by me, and relies on listener support. If you're enjoying this episode and the work that I do, and you want to support an indie podcaster, if you have some spare change, you can financially contribute to the upkeep of this podcast. You're under no obligation. This podcast is free and always will be, but there are a couple of ways you can help if you wish to and if you have the means to. You can make a one-off donation at verbaldiorama.com/tips, or you can subscribe to the Patreon to support the show monthly at verbaldiorama.com/Patreon. All money made goes back into this podcast by paying for software subscriptions, website hosting, and new equipment. Huge thank you for your continued support. Now let's learn some more about this movie and how Keanu Reeves is somehow connected to it. It's now time to segue into the obligatory Keanu reference of this episode. And if you don't know what that is, it's where I try and link every movie that I feature with Keanu Reeves for no reason other than he is the best of men. And speaking of creepy, the ventriloquist dummies in Toy Story 4 are pretty creepy. And as I've said, I'm not a fan of ventriloquist dummies. But a character who's not creepy, but is a doll himself, is Duke Kaboom, who's obviously played by Keanu Reeves. And that is the easiest way to link Keanu Reeves to M3GAN via Duke Kaboom, who is technically also a doll character, and so is M3GAN. Gerard Johnstone had a very clear vision for M3GAN, which also applied to the score and soundtrack as well. He wanted M3GAN to sing as well as play piano, and he listened to Anthony Willis's score for Promising Young Woman, and he really liked it, and he asked Willis to compose the score for M3GAN. During a discussion with Johnstone and the executives of Blumhouse, Willis suggested doing a musical arrangement similar to that of a Disney animated film, which included M3GAN randomly bursting into song, which obviously not only adds to the cheesiness of the movie, but also kind of adds to the creepiness of an AI doll just suddenly bursting into song. And just like modern AI, M3GAN also writes and performs her own song, Tell Me Your Dreams, which has lyrics by Gerard Johnstone and piano by Anthony Willis. M3GAN also ironically sings Titanium by Sia because she is actually made of titanium. And as I mentioned, the movie was not going to have M3GAN dance, but when the dance was added, it was seen as prime marketing material. Universal's Chief Marketing Officer Michael Moses saw the dance and spotted a TikTok dance trend. Gerard Johnstone originally disagreed having the dance in the trailer, as did Alison Williams, but Universal insisted that the dance should be in the marketing. The dance, copied by fans and influencers, spurred 1.3 billion views from hashtag M3GAN, hashtag M3GAN movie and hashtag M3GAN dance. Universal even assembled a troupe of M3GAN dancers who danced at the global premiere. They also went on tour, making stops at the Empire State Building, subways, The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel Live, and even the front of an American Girl doll store, as well as an American football game at half-time. All of this footage ended up on social media, fueling the public's desire to see the movie. Even Child's Play's Chucky got into the mix and started a Twitter feud with M3GAN. With hashtag M3GAN dance racking up billions of views, it goes without saying that the doll's copyable dance moves resonated with a teen audience. Akela Cooper's original script was a bit more gory with a higher kill count, but a decision had to be made by the creators as to whether to stick to the gory original material or drop the body count a little so that the film could get a PG-13 rating for the teen audience. And crucially, the decision was made to cut the movie and aim for a PG-13 rating, which it got. Cooper wished for an unrated version later down the line, and she would get her wish with the unrated home media version. Some fans were disappointed when it was announced that the movie would be PG-13, but producers Jason Blum and James Wan stayed loyal to their plans, and it opened up M3GAN to that lucrative teen market. M3GAN was originally scheduled to be released on the 13th of January 2023, but was moved up a week to avoid competition. It had its world premiere at the TCL Chinese Theatre in Los Angeles on the 7th of December 2022, and it was released theatrically in the US on the 6th of January 2023. It was released at the end of December 2022 in France and Belgium. In the US, it hit number 2 on release due to the incumbent Avatar: The Way of Water, which had been out 4 weeks and was still at number 1. M3GAN stayed at number 2 for 2 weeks and dropped to 4th in its 3rd week. Puss in Boots: The Last Wish actually climbed to 2nd that week. That was an episode a couple of months back. M3GAN stayed in the US top 10 for 6 weeks. Bolstered by the PG-13 rating, on its $12 million budget, M3GAN grossed $95.2 million domestically and $84.9 million internationally for a total worldwide gross of $180.1 million. Deadline Hollywood calculated the net profit of the film to be $78.8 million when factoring together expenses and revenues, which is not a bad profit at all. On Rotten Tomatoes, it has a rating of 93%, with a critical consensus reading, unapologetically silly and all the more entertaining for it, M3GAN is the rare horror comedy that delivers chuckles as effortlessly as chills. And there was a sequel to M3GAN, M3GAN 2.0, released in the summer of 2025, once again directed by Gerard Johnstone, and this time made M3GAN more of a hero, after her design was copied for a Pentagon android for covert intelligence, infiltration and assassination missions called Amelia, and obviously Amelia becomes self-aware, escapes, and there's only one AI android who can help. It's a fun movie, but a bit different to the original, and unfortunately, because of those differences, it struggled at the box office. A spin-off titled Soulmate, with the 8, is the third entry in the franchise, but it was pulled from Universal's release slate in January 2026, while Blumhouse and Atomic Monster sought a new distributor. And M3GAN is very much a movie that knows what its audience wants. The doll is front and centre, quipping like a gay icon, and the adult humans are either the bad guys or the very bad guys. Case in point, Katie and Gemma. Katie becomes orphaned in a terrible car accident, literally witnesses the deaths of her parents, and there's no emotional response, not even to good memories of her mother. Now, you could just say this is trauma, a child being thrust into her aunt's care and then emotionally attaching to the one person who seemingly cares for her, which is M3GAN, but the movie does away with any thoughtful exploration of Katie's grief. Similarly, Gemma, who has not only become the guardian of her young niece, but also loses her sister and brother-in-law, seemingly has zero emotional response to finding this out, except for the semi-annoyance of having to take in her orphan niece. There's no sadness for the loss of her sister, no grieving, no funeral. The movie just simply does not want to go there. It just wants to get to M3GAN. And that's actually kind of a positive for this movie and for M3GAN. But unfortunately, it makes Gemma more of a robot than M3GAN. Katie's grandparents in Florida are the obvious choice here, as they seem to actually want to take care of this child. But there would be no movie without Katie, and her relationship with M3GAN is the crux of this movie, as parents do struggle with work, home life and other responsibilities. It is only natural to want to have some time to yourself, and screens do allow for that. But if technology is raising your children, you need to know what's on that technology, and this is where you realise that YouTube and Roblox are not ideal babysitters. M3GAN is a product of the pandemic in more ways than one, when schooling went online and parents struggled to live and work during those unprecedented times and would stop at nothing to occupy children stuck inside. The pandemic was trauma-inducing for many. Researchers are still studying the impact the pandemic had on children's social development, but for young children who couldn't go to school, couldn't hang out with friends, their experiences during those formative years were unlike any other generation. It could have led to missing out on learning social cues, developing social and conversational skills. It all depends on the child and their situation. A trauma-filled anxious child like Katie might then gravitate to the relative safety of a relationship with a doll like M3GAN, who is relatable, unlike the aloof aunt who doesn't have a setup to raise a child. That Gemma, an intelligent, well-educated young woman, doesn't know the harm that outsourcing parenting could do is the silliest concept that the movie tries to sell us. But even for adults, glued to their phone screens, obsessed with getting ChatGPT to do things for them, if the internet and phone networks went down, we'd all be screwed. Katie has an unhealthy attachment to M3GAN, just like we all have unhealthy attachments to our own devices. Still, this movie and its marketing knows who you're here for, the sassy killer doll and the crazy kills. And as with most PG-13 horror movies, the unrated version I have on Blu-ray is so much more fun than the theatrical version. This is a movie that understands the assignment it sets out with, just to be campy and fun, but also force yourself as parents to ask how much quality time you're spending with your child, reading them stories, tucking them in, or are you just asking Alexa to play a bedtime story? Oh, and we all know Alexa is listening to us at all times, right? Parenting is tough enough. without having that Alexa come to life and start murdering people. But then AI toys are nothing new. This movie parodies Furbies, which, although rudimentary compared to M3GAN, did attempt to learn over time. Furbies never attempted to kill anyone though, except for that one scene in The Mitchells versus the Machines, which is also a previous episode of this podcast. Gerard Johnstone has said the reason he accepted the gig to direct M3GAN was as a father himself, bringing his kids up in the age of devices and trying to figure out the balance, and why was no one really talking about how scary this all is? Because while M3GAN may not be as chaotic as Chucky or as creepy as Annabelle, as the concept of AI raising your child, she is scary. But what's scarier is what real-life technology is doing to our real-life kids. Thank you for listening. As always, I would love to hear your thoughts on M3GAN, and thank you for your continued support of this podcast. If you have enjoyed this episode on M3GAN, you may also enjoy a previous episode that I did, episode 274, which is on Child's Play, which, again, killer doll movies. You gotta love them. There were many Child's Play movies in total, but the first is genuinely the best, and it still holds up really well. I would highly recommend that movie and also the episode on the history and legacy of that movie as well. As always, give me feedback on my episode recommendations. Let me know if you've listened to the episode and what you think. April is over, so AIpril is over, and it's been fun talking about AI in movies, but it's also time to move on to something new. Double episodes have been a thing on this podcast before, talking about a movie and its sequel or a movie and its remake. But what about a movie and its twin? Twin films have always been a strange Hollywood phenomenon. And while I didn't really want to do a whole month of them because I thought that might be a bit overkill, I wanted to go to two of the biggest pairs of twin films from the 1990s, specifically disaster movies. And I want to start with A Small Town versus A Big City. Brosnan and Hamilton versus Jones and Hesh. In the 1997 pairing of Dante's Peak and Volcano, which were released just a couple of months apart and both starred volcanoes. The titular Dante's Peak and an underground volcano at the La Brea Tar Pits in Los Angeles, as one man and one woman in each used their skills to save the day. And for the first time, I'm pitting one movie against the other. So join me next time for the history and legacy of Dante's Peak versus the history and legacy of Volcano. Thank you for listening to Verbal Diorama, a totally free and independent podcast that relies on listener support. If you want to show your support in multiple different ways, you could leave a rating or review wherever you found this podcast. You could tell your friends and family about this podcast, or you could find me and follow me on social media and you can share the podcast that way. I am at Verbal Diorama across social media, where you can share posts, like posts, comment on posts. It all helps really to get the word out there, to hopefully get other people to know this podcast and know the recent episodes that I've put out. I genuinely love doing this podcast, and anything you could do to help would be so appreciated. A huge thank you to the incredibly generous patrons of this podcast. I could not do what I do without their support. To Simon, Laurel, Derek, Kat, Andy, Mike, Luke, Michael, Scott, Brendan, Ian, Lisa, Sam, Jack, Dave, Stuart, Nicholas, Zoe, Kev, Danny, Stu, Brett, Zenos, Sean, Rhino, Philip, Adam, Elaine, Aaron and Steve. Please consider joining them and supporting this podcast on Patreon if you have the means to. If you want to get in touch, you can email verbaldiorama@gmail.com. You can also go to verbaldiorama.com and you can fill out the contact form. You could say hello, you can give feedback, or you can give suggestions as well. I would genuinely love to hear from you. You can also DM me on social media as well, if that's an option available to you. I love to hear from people and I always try to respond as quickly as possible. Thanks again for listening and thanks for supporting independent podcasting. It means more to us than you know. And finally,
okay, Gemma?
Huh?
Would you like me to put on your end-of-day playlist?
Why did you ask me if I was okay? You're not programmed to ask me how I feel. Elsie. Megan. What are you doing?
Couldn't sleep. Occupational hazard. How about you? What are you doing up so late?
There's something wrong with your data reports. They're just not uploading to the cloud server.
Have I done something to upset you, Gemma?
No, of course not.
And yet your demeanor indicates that I have.
Megan, turn off.
Well, hold on a second. I thought we were having a conversation. You say nothing is wrong, and yet all the moisture has drained from your eyes and mouth into other parts of your body. There's something you want to ask me, isn't there?
Megan, did you do something wrong?
Well, in order to answer that question, you need to define the parameters.
Did you hurt someone?
God, I hope not. Because if I did, we'd both be in a lot of trouble.
Bye.
Movies you know.